China is at it again. They are on a conquest to conquer the South China Sea, where their eventual destination is going to be Australia. We'll get to that in a bit. But nonetheless, here is the ship that is stopping China from expanding into Filipino territory. So that ship right there is from World War II, and it purposely has been beached by the Philippines to extend the sovereignty and the reach of the Filipino waters to stop China from expanding. I swear this is a real thing. I know it's kind of confusing. We'll get into all of this. Please stick with me.
A dispute between China and the Philippines over a sunken warship has heated up. Footage released on Tuesday by the Chinese Coast Guard shows its ship spraying a Philippine vessel with a water cannon in what Beijing described as a warning to Manila. The Philippine vessel had been carrying supplies to a grounded warship in a disputed area of the South China Sea.
That's right, you heard that correctly. The Filipinos send supplies to a grounded warship. Now again, we'll get into all of this. This is an actual military base, and then we're going to watch a clip on what it's like to live in this warship. And I'm telling you right now, the conditions are terrifyingly bad. I can't even believe this is a real thing, but nonetheless, it's stopping China, and it's really pissing them off.
The warship, which dates back to World War II, is used by the Philippines as a military outpost. It was purposely grounded in 1999 to reinforce Manila's sovereignty claims in the Spratly archipelago. Beijing wants the ship to be towed away, but Manila remains defiant.
Now, there's a lot of irony and hypocrisy here behind China on the Philippines using their warship as a sovereign area or their own little military base. The reason being is because China is doing the exact same thing. They are extending their reach closer and closer throughout all of the South China Sea, interrupting trade, interrupting a lot of economic stability within the region. But China does the same thing. They make these man-made islands, they make these sea bases and say, well, this is Chinese territory, and anything that's 300 miles around this little island is ours, Chinese territory. But that's what the Philippines is doing, and now China's mad about it. But here's their response to this entire situation.
China's foreign ministry released a statement reiterating its request for the warship to be removed, adding that its, quote, goodwill and sincerity on the issue had been ignored. Saturday's incident is just the latest in a long list of complaints Manila has lodged against China. In February, the Philippines accused Chinese coast guards of using a laser to try to disrupt another resupply mission to its troops. China claims sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, which overlaps with the waters of Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Taiwan, and the Philippines.
Okay, so this right here is the second Thomas Shoal, and this little piece of land is essentially where the ship is docked, or in the area the ship is docked. Look how small of an area China is willing to essentially start a conflict over, okay? This little piece of territory, and this is the entirety of the South China Sea. And just like the clip said, we have the Philippines, we have Vietnam, we have Malaysia, Taiwan. China is extending their sovereignty into all of those nations and just simply ignoring that Vietnam has a stake in the South China Sea. The Philippines, they have access to the South China Sea. China is saying, no, we have access to all of this. Now, I want to get into this little ship down here and essentially what life is like and how this ship is really the ultimate troll to stop China and to show the world the hypocrisy on how China is dealing with this situation.
It is not easy living for a couple of months inside a ship. It is not also easy that you will be assigned in BRP Sierra Madre, especially with the current condition of the ship. After 15 years, this is now the current situation of BRP Sierra Madre.
And by the way, I'm sorry for the video quality. This is the only video I could find that gives us like a detailed look inside of the ship and the sailor's life.
Or LT-57, which was deliberately grounded by the government. This was the home of 9 soldiers for about 5 months. First Lieutenant Mike Pelotero was the assigned officer in charge during their tour of duty. He was assigned for the welfare and well-being of his men on board. To be assigned in a secluded area surrounded with waters and other claimants is a hard duty.
I'm going to say this. I complained about living in a foxhole for about 30 days when I was in the U.S. Army. I could not imagine being on like 6 or 9 month rotations, being on this ship, surrounded by water, with no air conditioning, and the whole thing is rusting apart. I mean, this thing sucks.
That is why soldiers assigned in the ship really need a serious discipline, not just physically, but also mentally. The only routine they follow starts early, when they wake up as early as 5 in the morning for exercise, take a bath in the sea, eat, read the Bible, and monitor their area of responsibility.
Again, I could never imagine living in a situation like this. I've worked with some of the toughest dudes in the world who've been Army Ranger, sappers, gone to Special Forces, and I think even they would have a hard time with this. I don't care who you are. You better be mentally tough to get through this rotation.
Night, they can only watch movies for 2 to 3 hours because that is the only allotted time they can use their generator set and save more for the next days. One soldier even said that they already memorized each line of each movie. In order for the soldiers not to feel sad or even feel depressed, they even have an entertainment room wherein they can dance and listen to music. The ship doesn't have any refrigerator. That is why they only eat canned goods all day.
Now, I will say this. I'm sure if you have the right group of guys, it's probably the most fun time ever. You guys are just partying on a ship. And even if China does show up, I mean, what are they going to do? Spray some water on you? China's not going to do anything about it. So, nonetheless, there is that aspect that you're about to go on a party out to sea. Now, I'm sure at night or when there's a really bad storm, it's probably the worst experience ever. But again, nonetheless, you're just out there with your boys hanging out. That's the way I see it.
Despite that, their mandate is to serve our country by our territory. According to Lieutenant Pelotera, the whole time they were stationed in the ship, they only saw Chinese ships in the area. BRP Sierra Madre is equipped with satellite phones and radio communication devices for them to be able to report latest incidents. There are times when they see fishermen from Vietnam, even our own fellow.
And again, that really is telling how China is really operating throughout the South China Sea. Without a doubt, they are watching this warship. Hopefully it'll catch on fire or disintegrate, but it looks like the Philippines is not budging. They're going to be keeping that ship for a while.
Filipinos who dropped by the ship. Some of them gave some fish for them to eat, and when there's a storm, they let them stay for the night. They even let them watch movies during their stay.
Okay, so as you can see, the Philippines, they are using this docked World War II ship as a sovereign territory and military base. You have 9 military members holding it down in the South China Sea, and China hates that. But there is one country that probably really appreciates that, Australia. Whenever you talk about China and the South Chinese Sea expansion, Australia always comes into the mix because they are truly preparing for a potential conflict that will most likely happen amongst Australia and China for total control of the Pacific.
President Xi Jinping opens the People's Congress in Beijing with an orchestrated display of unity, taking aim at the US, accusing it of leading a Western pylon impeding China's growth. As Fairfax newspapers scream, red alert.
We need to build our preparedness. We want to avoid such a conflict, but we need to be ready for it.
A national security panel assembled by the papers warning China is preparing a full-scale invasion of Taiwan much sooner than expected, and Australia would have only 3 years to prepare to join a war alongside the US.
Okay, so if you are a little confused as to why Taiwan has anything to do with Australia and how Australia would get sucked into a conflict, you have to understand that the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom are all in an agreement that if one person goes to battle, especially Australia down in the Pacific, we all go to battle. And the thing is this, Taiwan is tied to the United States, and if the United States gets sucked into that conflict, thus Australia gets sucked into that conflict. That is why Australia has been worrying that something might potentially go down. In fact, the United States has even sent nuclear subs on behalf of the Australians, has sent them a lot of equipment to prepare for a potential conflict, or at least to deter a potential conflict.
Much shorter than the 10-year window set by the Morrison government.
An important observation to make, but they did nothing about it.
What we need to do is increase our strike capability, so that's through missiles, greater mobility.
Former Prime Minister Paul Keating slamming the reporting as wantonly biased and inflammatory. Bill Shorten also critical.
I don't think it resolves either our national security or our relations to China.
I know a lot of us don't see Australia as like the super tactical target for China to take out, but Australia truly is the number one opponent to China's expansion. I mean, they even said that the United States is stopping the expansion of China. And guess what? China is trying to expand. That's why they want to get rid of that tiny little warship, get them out of the way. Imagine that. A World War II ship is stopping the expansion of China, but more so is Australia by being in the presence of the area, sending out their own warships and making sure China knows they do not want Chinese expansion and they are ready to go to conflict. I don't think conflict is a good thing, but that's what they're saying. So that is currently what's going on with this World War II ship that is stopping China from expanding into the South China Sea. Again, I really want to reiterate, there are a lot of parties involved here. It's not only the Philippines, they're just standing up for themselves. It's a very difficult and complex situation because a lot of this ties up to Taiwan, because if Taiwan gets involved, everyone gets involved because many of these nations who oppose China, they are all allies, especially with the United States, especially with Australia. And not only that, you have some of Japan involved with that, but then you also have North Korea who's in the mix of things. So there's a lot going on right now, and I might do some more deep dives on this entire situation, more so on this World War II vessel where I could not imagine what the conditions are living in that thing. I mean, we saw a glimpse of it. I mean, they rely on fishermen for some AC and for some movies. As you heard from the video, they memorize a lot of the movies. I couldn't even imagine that. Nonetheless, it's a highly effective way to keep China away. So yeah, that's the video. Leave your comments and opinions down below, and we'll see you guys later.